Okay, everyone, I think we're going to get started. We may have a few more people trickle in, and I will let them in when they arrive, but I want to get started. So hello, and thank you all for joining us this evening for the first installment of our annual Art School panel series, Fine Art Practice. Our three panelists, who I will introduce momentarily, will be asked a series of questions about the application process to start art school, as well as specific questions regarding portfolios. After the panelists have finished discussing, we will open it up to a Q&A session with students, parents, and teachers. I'll move into the introduction of our three wonderful panelists. First, we have Blair Clemo. Professor Blair Clemo is an associate professor of craft and material studies, ceramic area head, and professor in the School of Graduate Studies at Virginia Commonwealth University. Clemo's utilitarian pottery and sculptural installations have been included in over 130 exhibitions, both nationally and abroad, in venues such as the China Ceramics Museum, Racine Art Museum, Tweed Museum, and the Kentucky Museum of Arts and Crafts. He has participated in artist residencies around the world, including the Northern Clay Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Dawang Culture Highland in Shenzhen, China, Zentrum für Keramik, Center for Ceramics in Berlin, Germany, Jinzhenshen International Studio in China, and the International Ceramics Studio in Hungary. In 2018, Clemo served as Distinguished Visiting Professor of Arts in Shandong University in Jinan, China. Visit ablairclemo.com for more information. Our second panelist, Corinne Diop, is a professor of art, graduate director for studio art, and associate director of the School of Art and Design at James Madison University. She teaches all levels of photography from intro to graduate level, as well as history of photography and contemporary art theory. Her practice centers around photography, including camera and scanner-based images, photo collage and montage, and installations of weathered photographs and objects. Our third and final panelist is Harold Linton. Harold Linton is a professor of drawing at George Mason University. Previously, he has served as director of the School of Art at GMU from 2005 to 2013, as well as chairman of the Department of Art at Bradley University from 1998 to 2005. Linton received a BFA in painting from Syracuse University and an MFA in painting from Yale University. Professor Linton is the author of 19 books and numerous scholarly articles on art and design, including a book titled Portfolio Design, first published in 1996, and now in its fourth edition. His artwork can be found in many public, private, and museum collections. So those are our three panelists. We are incredibly excited to have them answer these questions and hear what they have to say. I think we should just get started with our panel questions. My first question for you all is, what is your experience with preparing or reviewing college application portfolios? Whoever is ready to answer, just jump right in and we'll pass it when you're done.
Well, can I be first?
Absolutely.
I'm not trying to sell this book. I'm just trying to hold it up so you can see that it's in print. This book is in its fourth edition, and I've also written books on portfolio design for interiors, for graphic design, and for marketing and architecture. And in my experience, I've met dozens, literally dozens of talented students who have risen to the challenge of packaging their work and putting it across so someone on the other end who's unfamiliar with their work will have an easy time understanding and digesting it. So I think there are a lot of factors involved in this process, and without taking up everybody's time with it, I'm happy to field questions and concerns from the visitors, from the student visitors whether it be an undergraduate portfolio or a graduate portfolio.
Well, I can go next. I've done portfolio reviews. We have several levels at James Madison University. One is to meet with incoming freshmen or transfers to give feedback on portfolios. Then also for entrance to our program, we have an artistic review. And then there also, for some of our majors, is a second level at the 200 level review for the design areas. I'm also a graduate director, so I have reviewed numerous applicants for the grad program. And then as professor, of course, helping students prepare those portfolios to apply to graduate programs. And as gallery director, looking at portfolios of people who won exhibitions. So it's kind of all different levels. That portfolio is key for artists.
I think mine's probably pretty similar, as my colleagues share a similar role as I do. But I think in terms of reviewing applications, portfolios, the same multiple levels. We do the National Portfolio Review Day as well. I've participated in that several times. It's a very rapid fire. Students come with a portfolio. It's just a couple minutes of giving some advice and helping to steward them through that application process with questions they have. We also have our students come into a freshman foundations program, and historically those students have had to apply to get into a major. That's no longer the situation at VCU, but we've reviewed those applications annually, and then also for transfer students to get into a specific major, where we're looking a little bit more specifically at the skill set and sort of the pursuit of a specific material sort of discourse. And then also graduate program applications, we review those as a department. So we look at those across all media levels or all media and sort of curate our graduate class from there. In terms of preparing portfolios, really primarily my experience in that is for the undergraduates to move into either the professional sphere or graduate school. I've taught senior seminar a couple times, which is also our portfolio preparation course. And then working with area high schools in very much a format like this to sort of mentor on how they might apply to VCU or other schools too. I've done some curatorial work. I served on the curatorial board of the Urban Institute of Contemporary Art in Grand Rapids, and I served on the curatorial board of the National Council on Education of Ceramic Arts as well. So those have both been opportunities to look at sort of a broad scope of applicants and sort of get an idea of what applications seem to hit and what seem to miss. So yeah, I'm done.
Thank you guys. Those are some great pieces of just like a really broad array of you guys' experience in portfolio reviewing. The second question is, how is the art school admissions process different from the rest of the school? And what is that process?
I'll go first this time. So I think I would imagine that the biggest difference is the portfolio, is that students are submitting samples of their work and being assessed. And it's a difficult thing because I think certainly a student coming in has to also be accepted to the university. So they go through a general application process that all university students would have to go through. But that is entering specifically into freshman foundations or our art program, visual arts program, they're being assessed on that portfolio, which is an odd kind of situation because it seems highly subjective. What are we looking for, and what is a student able to sort of demonstrate and show? So I would say that's the big difference. That's sort of the mystery of how do you put the portfolio together and how do you get past that point of sort of assessment. Yeah, that's what that process is. And I would say that's the big difference. And I think that's what we're here to talk about. So, yeah.
Yeah, ours would be similar, that you would have to be accepted to JMU. And then our portfolio review is separate. So we actually might want to accept you. We can put a little plug in to admissions, like if you're awesome, but your GPA isn't that great, and we write this, amazing review, they might bump you up if there's other people your level. So there's that little edge we can have, but otherwise you have to get into JMU or it doesn't really count. And then vice versa, you could get into JMU, but not be artistically accepted into our art program. Now, we do have some art degrees that don't require a portfolio. So I think that might be a little different than the other two schools, that we also have a BA and a BS in studio art. And those can allow someone who doesn't make the portfolio cut to come in, take foundations, beef up a portfolio, and make sure that's what they want to do. Because I'd like people to know that it's not like, oh, we're so exclusive and mean. It's that we want to pick people who will succeed. And it's not easy to be an artist. Like, we all know that. So it's like you want to help people make sure they're picking the right major.
Yeah, I would just add to both of those comments that we receive a lot of transfer students from community colleges and so forth around our vicinity. And we counsel those students to come over for a portfolio review and a discussion of their interest in the program, and then make a presentation following that. So otherwise, pretty similar experiences.
A follow-up question for all of you. Does the admission or the application for the art school or art department, art major happen simultaneously as the rest of the school, or do you get past the process of applying to the full university and then you move into a second process of the art department?
Ours can happen in either order. We have various deadlines, like there's 4 feedback days. I think it's November, December, January, February. And so it may be you're applying to JMU early admission, and it would not exactly line up with our other days. But we also can have rolling admission if someone really needs to know that it's submitted. Usually feedback now, of course, it's online, but it used to be in person and get a tour and ask questions, and kind of simultaneously we're seeing if they're a fit and the students seeing if we are a fit. Now, of course, it's more online. So it can also be various time points where they're deciding which school to go to, and it might make a big difference how that portfolio stacks up.
Great, thank you.
It's similar for us too. I think for us, it's like they happen in concert, but they kind of don't. They're 2 separate admissions, and I think that's actually a tactic for the university to potentially keep students that may not get into the art program. They may say, "Well, you still got in. Is there any other?" I think so. They do it strategically that way, but it does happen in concert in terms of how a student would be accepted. They would be accepted to school and the art program at the same time. At the graduate level, it's very different. The faculty, I'm the director of the Clay program, and if I say somebody gets in, they get in. So it doesn't matter. It's different than like their GPA. I don't even think we have a GPA requirement at the graduate level. We certainly have BFA or professional equivalent and other sort of rubrics they have to sort of go through, but it's very different at that level. So once we sort of say, yes, you're in, they go through the process of the university goes through the process of just accepting them. So it's a little different on different levels.
I would add, the only thing I could add to that is that the graduate portfolio application process is very, very broad and conceptual. And students are exploring the Netherlands, so to speak, and trying to assemble a portfolio that tests the water in terms of creativity. And so we see a naturally broader view of portfolio itself from the graduate application pool. And that's always exciting and fun to experience.
That brings up a point of difference for our graduate program. The entire faculty votes on that, and we're more interdisciplinary rather than like having one mentor.
Right.
And then a point for the undergrad, For the portfolio feedback, you might be with one faculty, maybe two, but for the actual education of if you're getting in or not, that's 3 independent reviewers. And that is to give reliability of like, it's not just, you know, someone liked or disliked what you're doing. We have a rubric. We have 4 specific areas we're looking for. So it's not just on a whim of like, oh yeah, you're in or out. It is actually, you know, trying our hardest to be fair and not just subjective.
I
Thank
hope
you,
my
guys.
comment didn't come off as that, because it's our process is certainly as laden with that sort of stuff also. You know, we do review graduate portfolios as an entire faculty, but we maintain some agency over our individual areas because we are the experts in those areas. So I think we have an equal probably amount of metrics and sort of objective lenses to look through our review processes as well. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. That helps set up a really helpful timeline for possible applicants. My next question is, what is a portfolio review? How is it helpful? How is it used? And how do I interact with my reviewer? Corrine, do you want to get us started?
Sure. For the undergrads, they would have sampling already of what they think they might be putting in. We have them talk about each piece. Is it from an assignment? Was it an inspiration of yours? What materials did you use? You know, what's the idea behind it? And kind of work through, we don't see it as a critique as much as feedback. And also like, you know, still trying to tease out the fit of like, I might, they might think, oh, I want to be graphic design. And I might see like, you know, this actually looks like printmaking. So I can start, you know, planning those ideas of like, you know, there are other fields you could be in. So trying to make them aware of things in high school you might not run across.
Just to clear it up, back up a minute, what can you explain the difference between maybe a critique and a portfolio review, now that you've kind of brought in that?
Yeah, so I'm not as much giving a value judgment on like this is good or this is bad, but I might, like if I do think the design could be better, I might be teasing out questions of what were you thinking? And like maybe some value judgment of like, you know, I think these drawings look like they really are showing us what we want to see, whereas like maybe these others, they're too much the same. So there might be some of that of kind of curating. And sometimes the things they weren't going to put in, like a sketchbook, might be like, wow, that, you know, maybe you want to include some of these pages you were just showing me, but these would be good to add in. So it's kind of like advice of, you know, you have all these 2D, what about like these sculptures over here? So yeah, I guess it's a little bit of curating because they, depending if they're freshmen, they get to have 10 to 12 examples. If they're transfer, I think it's 12 to 16, you know, so they have to pare it down and like, which out of all this that you have might the faculty most feel shows us what we need to see.
Absolutely. Harold, do you want to build off of that?
There's so much that the students bring with them. It tests, you know, some of the basic concepts of being able to communicate and being interested in specific areas, creative areas in the program, finding a match between what we have to offer and what they have to pursue. It really gets into a lively discussion between a faculty advisor and a prospective student. And it's not a simple discussion either. It gets into all kinds of aspects of creativity, including materials and science and technology especially, and lots of areas that the student is interested in that we want to make sure we have a good connection between what we offer and what they want to pursue.
Thank you.
I just have, I totally second and third, I guess, those others comments. But I think the point about really kind of trying to match up a student's needs versus what a university offers is really fundamental to that. It's so important because I think that one of the things that happens, at least at VCU, is that students come into art foundations, not into a specific major, and they're there for 1 year. And that's a non-material specific, very sort of general overview of art. I mean, they learn two-dimensional design, three-dimensional design. They learn things like time and performance and different kinds of just modes of making, different tactics that artists use. And I think oftentimes in those portfolio reviews, students will have very specific reviews because they've heard that's what they're supposed to do. So they'll have really great, like a portfolio of, let's say, a dozen photographs, and they're great photographs, but they're not entering into the photo program yet. So it's actually a little bit premature. And I think that oftentimes I think that's a little bit of, I certainly thought that when I went to grad or to art school, I thought, well, I'm going to learn how to do a thing. Like I'm going to learn how to draw or paint or whatever. But I think that art school is so much more than that. Like that's an aspect of it, but you're really learning how to be part of the professional vocation that is art. And so creative thinking and creative problem solving is paramount to that. And being able to be innovative with materials and really develop a relationship with materials is important. And so more things like direct observation drawings, even though they may not represent a student's interest, they better round out an applicant in terms of how we view them, in terms of how they're thinking through materials, how they're thinking through things. Somebody brought up assignments versus sort of their own individual inspiration. It's often great when a student can show something that goes beyond the bounds of an assignment, because we've all had art assignments before and we kind of can pick them out, So I think that kind of a conversation is really important in the portfolio review. Really, students are selling themselves. It's a handshake, it's an introduction. And how do you want to introduce yourself is really the question. Do you want to introduce yourself in this way that's very specific? Is this the right time for that? Or do you want to sort of give yourself a general overview of who you are as an artist and a thinker? I think that's more effective often at that entry level.
If I could add just one small thing, I really picked up on what Blair was saying. We had a student that came for an interview, a second year student from one of the community colleges, and plunked down 12 sketchbooks on the review table that were chock full from beginning to end of ideas and sketching and rendering and mixed media and so forth. And it just blew everybody out the door. I mean, they were so loaded with process and ideas and moving through space and time, and just wonderful books that seeing how a student develops an idea through a process of being graphic. I can't put a high enough value on that because it plays well in all of our disciplines that we offer.
Thank you. Those were some really excellent points. My next question is, what is the connection between portfolio review and the actual application? Harold, do you want to get us started, even though you left off last?
Well, portfolio review and what did you say, the application process?
Yes, so the actual application process.
Yeah. Well, portfolio review for us is without question part of the undergraduate process of being admitted into a discipline of your choice. And it's also equally important applying for the graduate program, the MFA program, or the MA program. We offer the BA, the BS. We have a relatively new program in game design that is attracting a lot of attention. But I think, the student needs to, the student applicant, I should say, needs to make careful preparation in terms of what breadth and depth they can show through their portfolio. And I don't mean that lightly. I think that's a very significant part of organizing yourself for the process And being able to discuss your work is the second half of that. Being able to make comments that show a certain sense of growth and development, research and exploration that goes right along piggyback with your work presentation.
Great. Blair, Corrine, do anybody want to jump right in?
Well, ours is also then submitted online. So this was even before the pandemic. Once you had your portfolio reviewed, yeah, and we do Corcoran and some of the other places too, but they tended to more often come to campus. For the actual submission, it was on Slide Room, and it has room for your 10 to 12 images. There's a section you can write a short description. There's another area that asks sort of resume items, an optional statement. And we also use that for scholarship review. So there is a place where they can write a longer essay and choose one artwork to be featured there to be considered for substantial funding. So it becomes more of an online application at that point. And that's again, like where it gets passed on to the raters and rubrics and all of that.
I think you two covered it.
Oh, and the transcripts are there too, if they had high school transcripts. So even though that's part of getting in JMU, we're also looking at that, like to see what classes they had, what grades they had. And it's in a holistic way rather than like any one thing. Like if you're not a good writer, but your artwork's good and you show you can succeed, it wouldn't be held.
The only thing I would add is that when you submit that application, that is the point of finality. There is no longer a dialogue when you submit that. You're submitting, and then you will get a result back. And so portfolio review can be anything before that. It could be an official portfolio review. It could be reaching out to a faculty to schedule something. It could even happen in a tour of a university or something like that. So I think I separate them in that. I mean, I think my colleagues here did a good job of sort of talking about what that actual process is of portfolio review as it applies to the application. But portfolio review can be any information or feedback that you need to get, any kind of dialogue you want to have. So before that application goes in, that is the period at the end of the sentence there. So yeah.
Great. This next question we've kind of touched on a little bit, but we'll circle back around and go into more detail. What types of work should you include in your portfolio? Should I focus on my different disciplines or just show one cohesive body of work? Should students adapt their portfolio depending on the type of program they are applying for? Blair, do you want to pick it back up again?
Sure thing. Yeah, this is a great question. Because this is so complicated. There's so many different ways to think about this and so many approaches, and there's no right way. As I said before, you're really trying to sort of give an idea of who you are as an applicant and how you might fit into the program. And that's both a wanting to get in, but also the institution understanding how they can serve you. So different types of work versus one cohesive body of work. I would say, the way I'll answer this is just by saying that when you come into VCU, for example, you come into an Art Foundations program and it's non-material specific. And I think most students, when they come in, we actually give them a survey and they select kind of what they think their major might be. That's a year from that. They're a year out from that decision. They have to go through the entire freshman year. But most of our students will declare, sort of prematurely declare their majors. And we also have an option that just says AFO, Art Foundations. And I think it's really important when a student comes into school that they know that they don't know yet and that they're there to learn and that they're going to be exposed to a whole bunch of things they didn't have access to anywhere else. So I think it's really important for students to My suggestion would be to apply as a general art student rather than a specific art student. The difference is really, of course, you can decide any major you want at the end of that freshman year, but mentally you have to do an extra sort of process of disenfranchising the idea of what you were going to do and then switching majors to something else. If you go in undecided and really use the university as a marketplace of ideas, then you just don't know yet. And you're making a decision as you go, which is a very different process than saying, maybe I don't want to do this after all. So, and I don't mean art, but I just mean the medium that I was choosing. We have 16 different majors in the School of the Arts at VCU, and there's differences between all of them, but there's also corollaries between all of them. So a student might think, I do three-dimensional work, I want to be a sculpture major, but the dialogue in sculpture is very different than the dialogue in craft, for example. Or they may think, I love digital media, I want to be in photo, but really they want to be in kinetic imaging because they like moving images, or they get into sound. And so I'm just sort of thinking about, I would apply in general, making a portfolio that gets you into the Freshman Foundations program, looking at what that program is going to entail and trying to hit as many of those things as you could. Should you adapt the portfolio to the different departments? I think it would depend. If you're going into a school that doesn't have that foundations program, or has, you know, you get to apply and go right into your major, I'm going to be a, I don't know, sculpture major right from day one, then I think that would be good to weigh your portfolio heavy towards that. But again, like if you already are a great sculptor, you don't need to go to school. Like you need to be a creative thinker, you need to be innovative, you need to be able to think strategically about how the work is happening. You need to show sort of a broad range of what you're doing and how you've been working. I really loved that comment about the sketchbooks, because I think that's exactly what I like to see in a portfolio, is really active thinking and real genuine curiosity. I think artists, we have to stay curious or we can't keep going, you know, otherwise we become something else. And so that real genuine curiosity and that real need to know and that need to want to get better is so vital to demonstrate in a portfolio. So I'm sorry, I think I rambled there, but I'm done.
No, that was great. Thank you.
It was all good points.
Gerald, do you want to build off of that?
Corinne, do you want to jump in on that one?
Sure. I was going to say ours is a little different because our studio art major has concentrations rather than all being majors. So they end up taking a lot of, we call it pick six. So your concentration plus other areas. So we're very broad. And then our other majors are industrial design, graphic design, and architectural design. What I found lately, I don't know what the difference is, but high school students sometimes are in STEM related programs that mean they do not have time for art classes, or they might be in a tech program. So they actually might have CAD drawings and,
Right.
you know, more design things. So it doesn't actually fit with the old days of like, oh, show us some drawings, you know, show us some ceramic sculptures. So we've actually gotten very open, like if you have some woodworking or you have some architectural design from your tech program, we're basically looking for four things. I have to read this so I don't forget. Technical skills, inventiveness, expressiveness, handling of design or composition. So the answer would be like, as long as you're showing all those things, you know, maybe someone could do that with 12 photos. I think you would show it better if you had a sampling of other things, but like, if that's all you have, then that's all you have, and go ahead and try. Like maybe we'll get to see enough in there to fill out the rubric and you would be in. It would be easier if you had like more array of things and, you know, more information to judge off of.
The only thing I can add to that, which I think is very comprehensive, is that to plant the idea of being a creative, being a source for ideas and being a source as an artist, being a source for new ways of looking at things. And to follow that up, I would add that it doesn't really matter what field you go into. Everybody's looking for someone who's a funnel of of creative exploration, is able to turn ideas around in space and time and purpose and content, and show you something that you just haven't seen or you didn't think was possible to see it quite the way they're presenting it. And I think pushing the idea of becoming a creative is our responsibility, just as we attend National Portfolio Days Association meetings all over the country. It's an opportunity for students to see what each other are presenting in the way of, just total creativity and new thinking. That's about all I wanted to add.
I was thinking along with that, like often I'll see someone copied from a photograph, or like, oh, it's Tom Cruise, drawn really well, and they're so proud of it. And it's hard to explain like that isn't what we're looking for, like that, copying and realism actually is detrimental, like, unless it would be like conceptual somehow, like appropriated and making some comment on society. But usually it's done in this, I was gonna say naive, but like in this way of like not really understanding, like what Harold's saying, like where you want something that's turning things upside down.
Yeah, it's really sounding like having many different aspects of your work is really the way to go in showing the full side of you as an artist, rather than just going full force with what you think that you know. We'll do one more question before we turn it over for Q&A. These next two questions are kind of related, so I will combine them. But in which format should I present my portfolio? Digital versus physical, especially how does this apply during the pandemic? Any tips for photographing work? My apologies. And what is the best way to prevent work? How to arrange it? Is there anything that should be avoided?
Well, we have a photographer on the panel, so I would concede space to her and time.
I was going to say that was a lot to digest, so please take your time.
Well, the one thing sometimes in a portfolio feedback, I will help with the photography, like if they photographed it and it's at an angle, so it's really a rectangular painting, but it's like at an angle, like, okay, put your camera square, or like drop it in your edit in your phone and like, stretch it out so it's parallel, crop in so you don't have like the grass or somebody's hand holding it. The lighting should be even. But I'm going to say, especially because with, presenting it online, a cell phone actually these days is like pretty adequate for getting what you need, since it's high enough resolution and is pretty flexible for using it. And then if you have multiple lights in the room, you can end up like with your own shadow, like your own cell phone in your head in the shadow on the artwork. So you want to like, just avoid that, so it's kind of common sense to not have shadows, even lighting. If you go outdoors, like not a bright sunny day, just like kind of a mellow overcast day would work, or, just finding where it highlights your work and not skewing it or putting weird shadows or weird shapes on it.
Simplicity is key. Harold, Blair, any tips for the actual photographing and presenting of the work in a portfolio?
I have a couple ideas. I think typically we call it art documentation, right? You're documenting the work. And the important distinction there is it's not art, it's documentation. And like any good documentary, it should tell the truth, right? So I think that making sure that it accurately depicts the work, however you need to do that, is important too. Because I think, in the days of being able to go in and alter colors or things like that, like, I think it's important that you're presenting the work as you'd like it to be seen, know, in a real sense of that. So the other thing is, I think you should look at examples. You know, like I think I look at a lot of three-dimensional work just because of the media area I'm in. And like, look at how other people are shooting. Like if I teach ceramics, so I'll look at like Ceramics Monthly as a magazine, pick it up and see what kinds of backdrops people are using. Look at how much of the object is in the frame and how much background and foreground there is. Look at how artists are using things for samples, you know, or as a way of showing scale. I mean, I think just like looking at professional, you can go onto any gallery's website if it's a decent gallery and see how they're photographing paintings or drawings or those things. So look at the media you're trying to present, and then all of Corinne's advice is perfect. You know, like don't skew angles or take pictures with crumply sheets in the background and distracted things like that. I mean, really look. I mean, artists have to look too, you know, like we have a developed practice of looking and thinking critically about what we see. So look at other examples and copy those examples of how to do it. Additionally, I think, you know, the format is going to be dictated by the university you apply to. So we're digital. I think pretty much everybody's digital at this point. I was probably one of the last generations to apply to grad school with actual slides. I think it was optional for me, and I applied with slides. Yeah, it's going to be digital, I would imagine. And then, you know, the other question too that's in here is sort of the arrangement of the portfolio, and that's a tough thing. Like the amount of time I spend with like students that are graduating, finishing a BFA and applying to grad school, like on what order images should be in and stuff. Like there's all these different theories about it. You know, ultimately I'll just double down on that. You're trying to present yourself as an applicant. So what would you like them to see right out of the gate? If you say, hi, my name is Blair, what is that handshake image that you want them to see? And then when you say, it was nice meeting you, what would that image be? You know, and how would you fill that conversation of who you are as an artist? That's a good way to think about, maybe for pace or kind of what order things could go in. Or maybe it's in terms of what your primary focus is. I want to be in ceramics, so here's some ceramic stuff, and then there's some other stuff over here that helps round me out as an applicant. So yeah.
Great. Harold, do you have any tips for presenting your work in a portfolio?
Not really. I think if your portfolio is well grounded, your work is well grounded, meaning that you have projects that depict fundamentals and strength in design or strength in visual communications. Those typically will find a place somewhere after the beginning, where the beginning of the portfolio begs for creativity and concept. And as you go along, you kind of push into various areas where you want people to recognize that you have strength across a broad array of discipline-based areas, for lack of a better way of putting it. I did a bunch of years of teaching in architecture with a background in painting and architectural design from Yale. And I think, you know, concept doesn't grow on trees. It's something that you have to cultivate, and to seed it carefully throughout the portfolio is a goal.
Great.
Yeah, I would say like maybe groupings that if there's like 3 photos and 3 ceramics, maybe they wouldn't be just like plunked everywhere. It might kind of flow. And then also like, you know, looking for, is there visually connections between some of the images or conceptual connections? Like, are some of the sculptures of people and the photos are of people? So maybe that kind of flows to put them next to each other. Whereas like at the beginning, it's more abstract.
Yeah.
So it's just like kind of moving things around to help the reviewer see the connections you're trying to make.
It's true.
Thank you, guys. I want to open this up for our audience members to ask questions. If you have a question that you'd like to ask and you want to say it out loud, you can raise your hand. I can ask on you to unmute yourself, or feel free to pop it in the chat.
I'd like to know what the cat's name is. I didn't hear. Can you hear?
Sorry, my computer acted up and you all went away for a minute, but I could hear
Can you
you.
hear me,
Very
Blair?
awkward. Yeah. His name is Chucky. Yeah, his name
Oh,
is
Chucky. Oh, what a
Chucky.
great name. Yeah.
Kind of like the orange-haired monster from that movie. Yeah, and he's very much an orange-haired monster.
Very cool. I've got a little dog here that's begging me to go out.
Oh, it's so bad. I can never have a Zoom without this happening.
Well, while we wait to see if there's any other questions, I'll chime in. I want to say thank you all for sharing this insightful information today. It's been really interesting to hear that there's a lot of similarities across universities, but also there's some differences. So I wondered if there's something that you want to point out about your particular university, whether it's JMU, GMU, or VCU. Is there anything you would like the audience to know about your school that perhaps may be different than others or similar than others? Is there anything you want them to sort of walk away with? It's really a pleasure to have representatives of each university here. So I would love to hear if there's anything you want to add to what you've already shared with us today.
I think it's important to ask a lot of questions about the school you're going to go to, no matter what that school is. I mean, talk to students, talk to alumni, talk to people, talk to professors, and really get a sense of what the experience is going to be like. I wish I could answer that question and say VCU is this, but the Department of Fashion Merchandising is very different than the Department of Sculpture. You know, they're very, very different, even in terms of the curriculum, the credit structure, everything. So one thing about VCU is it's sometimes really hard for students to be very nimble between departments, because most of the students we serve are majors and are focused in that major. So some departments may have a 3-credit class structure, some may have a 4-credit class structure. So I think it's really important in the case of VCU, but any school, is just to really take your time to decide kind of where you want to be and what you want to do. There's no rush in that. So it's hard with an animal as large as VCU. It's very hard to wrangle one answer as to what that institution is like, but every department has its own individual community. I think that's the biggest, it's not a criticism, but it's a thing I hear of students that change majors is, I wish I would have known what this department was when I chose my major, because this is where I wanted to be. And I'm sure we have students that changed out of that major that say the same thing at other
Sure.
majors. So, you know, I think in that way, the more questions you can ask, the more peers, relationships you can gather. I love when Art Foundation students poke around the department or contact me and want a tour. I'm so happy to give those things. So it makes for happier students because they're where they want to be and they're shining and they're doing what they want to do, and it's awesome. So ask a lot of questions. Yeah.
Very good. Karina?
Yeah, we also have a foundations year, and there's some fluidity after that. If you want to be in track and graduate on time, that's a different story. But for some people, there's a portfolio review for the design areas. And at that point, if they don't pass that portfolio review, you can try one more time. So there's a lot of help building that, like to try to be successful. But sometimes we find it really isn't a fit. And sometimes those parents tell people to be in a major that they actually didn't want to be in. And so I've had like numerous times people don't pass for graphic design. They end up coming to photo and they excel. And one became our Senior Achievement Award winner because it was a fit of like imagining that they needed this kind of path for a career or what their parents said they would pay for. And so all those credits actually could count because they counted as art electives. So there's, some areas that can interchange, and you can switch around and still like not be back at square one. So I think that's really helpful for students to be able to sort out what they really want to do.
We have a vigorous, growing, blossoming art education program, and it's the graduate level. And the students are coming with a BFA required into it. And so they're exploring creativity and expression and so forth, while at the same time developing, nurturing their ability to teach, youngsters. I just mentioned that program because it's an outstanding example of one of our disciplines.
And that's actually something different. I've noticed that about GMU. Ours is simultaneous. So with any of our degrees, you could be getting the art licensure and
Right.
graduate. With some, then the student teaching would be like you graduate and then you have to do a student teaching that next fall. But you actually graduate with a license in art ed if you choose to.
Right.
Some of the classes you take are prescribed, like it wouldn't be any old class, like you need a specific ceramics, you need specific psychology. So they tell you so that as you're picking gen ed, you're picking ones that also count for the School of Education.
Exactly.
Thank you, guys. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. Do we have any more questions? Are there any last remarks from you guys before we finish this out? Just any overall tips or advice that you can give for people applying to art school?
I'm going to say don't take things personally. Artists get used to rejection. It's just part of it. Not everybody's gonna like everything, and that's okay. We're looking for fit. We want you to succeed. And there's the try again, because we've had people who don't get in, and then they do the next portfolio review and they've changed it up and they do get in. And if you have this passion and dream, you can't let what someone else tells you stop you from doing it. So I think portfolio reviews are coming from a good place of wanting to find a fit, and not to say like you will never be an artist, because nobody's saying that.
It's a good point.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Harold, Blair, any last minute tips or advice to give art school applications?
Yeah, I think I've already said this like 800 times, but the more information you have, the better decision you can make. It's just the way it is. So rather than sort of lurking in the shadows and then submitting this application blind, there's lots of opportunities. I think every university out of necessity is always trying to do outreach and trying to like have open houses and portfolio review days. And I think we do 4 open houses a semester in my department. So there are so many opportunities for you to go and meet people and ask them questions. And the dialogue that happens at those kinds of open houses they're like no other dialogue anywhere. It's like there's really an opportunity to ask questions, to get to know people, to get a flavor. And we always make sure there's students at those. It's not just faculty talking at people. There's student representatives. And don't be a stranger at places. Go see what it's like. Go ask students what it's like. Imagine yourself in that space and ask if it aligns with your dreams and your goals. I think that's important. So don't be nervous.
The only thing I would add to what's already been said is look for stuff that's unusual, and look for places in your portfolio where you can put something that will grab attention and stand out, and also reflect skill and ability at the same time. But don't be afraid of putting things in your portfolio that are eye grabbers.
Well, thank you guys. I think those were great tips, great advice. You answered a lot of questions about just the application process for art school, for regular school, just getting involved in the art community. I want to thank everybody for coming out today. And I especially want to thank you guys for serving on this panel and answering questions and being a part of this discussion.